I'm Flood, and I joined Farcaster probably, I don't know, it was about a year and a half ago at this point. Initially got my start in crypto back in 2015. I bought some Ethereum for, I think it was like $20 worth. I forget what price it was, but it was right around then, 2015, early 2015. Um, I'd been listening to a few friends of mine that had been in crypto, and then I felt like I sort of missed Bitcoin for whatever reason at that point. And I was like, oh, cool, Ethereum's new. And I started watching videos of Vitalik, and I was like, man, this guy's really brilliant. I don't really know what he's talking about, but I'm very
Huh.
interested in what's going on here. So yeah, ended up tossing a little bit of cash in that. And then I didn't really check back much on it until around like 2016. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was hearing from a few friends that, the market was coming back and whatever. So that around that time, I think it was like late 2016, early 2017, um, I started trading a little bit and was having some fun doing that. And then that's when NFTs started to come around. And at the time, I was friends with, still I'm friends with him, Jason Bailey, Art Gnome, who was one of the first, or he was the first person to write about, the culture developing around NFTs and crypto art at the time. And he actually lived pretty close by to me. So we did meet up a few times, and I faded CryptoPunks like many of us have. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll come back to that eventually, and whatever happened happened. But yeah, so around that time, wrote up that cycle, and then I think it was a couple years later that me and my buddies who had been working together for a number of years, just working in design and development. I've been working on my own personal projects, but I'd also worked at a couple of bigger startups like Formlabs, New Balance. We decided to go take our like collective and firm at the time and just go straight Web3. So yeah, about 2 years ago, two and a half, it's sort of muddy, but we formed Operating System, which is a design and development firm that's really focused on, Web3 and generative art and, the stewardship of that. We've worked with a number of companies over the years, like Club NFT and Right Click Save and Transient Labs. And, yeah, a slew of others. Currently working on stuff like Clanker, Native, Jihad's Native, as well as Derek Brown's Native, and a couple other smaller things in the works as well. And yeah, I mean, I guess I got my start as a product designer. I went to school at Wentworth in Boston, Massachusetts, and studied physical product design at first, which was like for me, furniture, sneakers, vacuums, all that sort of stuff. And from a young age, I'd always been attracted to, designing things, sketching things, making things with my hands, taking things apart, putting them back together, working on two-stroke engines, those sorts of things. Yeah, and all of that came together going to school for industrial design, but it was sort of tough to at the time actually get a job getting out of school. So I had a couple of internships. I worked for this guy Jonathan Olivares, who was doing works for Knoll and Herman Miller at the time, and is now the head of Knoll Herman Miller's design department. He's the design director there, and that was a lot of fun and was sort of like the foundation of my design experience, going to Milan the first 3 or 4 years for the furniture fair, meeting a bunch of like furniture designers that I read about and studied in books. And, that's kind of like, I guess the start of my design career, and like seeing, where I was going to land. And then from there, I ended up working for myself doing sort of like a hard goods and soft goods company called Plan Work. We were focused on making like leather wallets and mirrors and door stops and that sort of stuff. And we did that for a few years, sold in a few ICA gift shops and museums and a few retail stores. We did retail racks for Kith NYC. We did signage for PillPack, which is now an Amazon company. Yeah, a number of other fun things. Ministry of Supply is another bigger one. And then, yeah, I went into, basically the bigger world of, larger companies, worked for Formlabs for like 6 or 8 months, worked for New Balance for 6 or 8 months. And I really just found out that I didn't like working at larger companies. And this was around the time that crypto was really starting to pop off in 2018. So went freelance and then worked on some stuff, got this group of buddies back together that we've been working on stuff with over the years in various shapes and forms, technical co-founder and another designer. And yeah, I guess that brings us basically up to now.
And so is it the two of you, you and the technical guy with the Opsys now, or is it three with another designer as well?
Yeah, so there's three in total. Sage, who lives in Arizona, is sort of like video, graphic, UI, UX. And then, yeah, Austin, he goes by Frag, Phragg on Workcast. He is the technical co-founder, so full stack.
Where are you guys getting these names of like Flood, Frag? These are, I mean, I've always liked your name, Flood, with the seemingly arbitrary, but perhaps not like number of characters. Frag also sounds like a pretty cool name. I don't know if you know the story on his, but at least on yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think his has been his gamer tag for like, I don't know, probably like 2 decades or something like that. I think it's also his GitHub account name. And then mine, I just liked the idea of floods for a long time. I like the way that the word sounds. And then I found that most platforms like didn't have that name, obviously. So I went with the 4 Fs as like sort of a tip to the early, I guess, image discovery tool called Found, which was like a precursor to Tumblr. And then Jound, which spun off of that, which is Justin Blythe's like visual blog that a lot of people might know if they follow like a lot of visual blogs from that time. He still does it too. But yeah, that's where it initially comes from.
Yeah, it is a good word. And I just like sort of the sound of it. And yeah, it's interesting. When I see it with the 4 Fs, I think of I go to color codes because naturally, and
Yeah,
I was
dude.
thinking it was like, maybe a reference to white or something like that. Like that's why I said arbitrary, because like 4 doesn't compute for me. For like 3, I'm like, oh, that could be like a 3-digit hex code, or 6, obviously, but I never knew about the 4. So now I get it. I like a subtle nod like that too. Like no one even really gets it. Like unless, I mean, people who are listening to this now might get it, but like I don't know if you've casted about it, but like that's a it's not a joke, but it's like a fact or whatever you want to call it. It's like mostly just for you, but it's pleasing,
Yeah, yeah. There's a little bit of the past coded in there. There's only one person that's like over the years been like, oh, is that like in relation to Found? And I'm like, yeah, it is. You get like, 1,000 points in my book. Like, who are you?
You
we're
get
probably going to be
warps.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll send you some warps. Yeah, that's funny. Cool. Well, and so I saw like, I guess there's 2 pieces to this, but I saw, you've got a clanker for Opsys. I don't know how intimately tied the coin is to what you guys are doing, but curious about that. And then, that naturally sort of leads to how you got working with Clanker and what you're doing over there. All I've seen from afar, and obviously, if there's pieces that you can't talk about or don't want to talk about yet, by all means, but I've seen some, logos and t-shirts going around that are just like really, really cool. So I'd be curious what you guys are up to over there.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of the coin itself, I had done branding with Proxy for Proxy Studio back like last April. We started branding. I think we finished it sometime in May. But yeah, it was just one of those things. I worked on those logos in exchange for a hypersub to Proxy Studio, which was kind of a fun thing. Because at the time I didn't really know, what to charge in Web3, in terms of like on Warpcast specifically, because it's a lot of smaller, founders and projects. So it's like, well, I think it makes sense for me to just test this out. And, get access to like a group that as far as I can see, is like really high signal. and yeah, I got to know, Alex through there. And actually Kagusha introduced us, which was a fun thing. She works for Morpho now, but, at the time she was not working and she was interested in, working on some design stuff. So that's when we started playing with higher and higher athletics, and then Proxy Studio as well. And he gave one of the sickest briefs by a client ever. It was like, I want like drones overseeing like a digital landscape, and like the Eye of Sauron and the eye, all seeing eye, but also like redacted style, like Blackwater mercenaries, not Blackwater, but you know what I mean. Like redacted type stuff. And I was like, cool. So we did the branding for Proxy. We ended up with like that Big Bang stars type logo. And then, fast forward to right around the time Planker was about to come out, Proxy was like, hey, I have this like degen stable coin I'm working on. Can you do a logo for it? And I was like, yeah, let me cook something up. And he's like, and then like a week later, he was like, I also have this project called Clanker that I'm working on. It's like an AI bot that launches tokens. And I was like, well, let's finish up like the design work on the stable coin first, and then I'll do it. And then he just stealth dropped Clanker. And I was like, it was like 3 days after, and I just tagged him and I was like, how about those logos for Clanker now?
I'm ready.
because it just like took off, which was crazy. But yeah, then fast forward to this year when they had the first Clank hack in Boston. I was there and they were talking about launching pre-sales for Clanker. So like the ability to launch a pre-sale for the token. So there wouldn't be as much like sniping, et cetera. You could potentially capture up to like 50 some odd percent of the supply. And it was just a random night, like the week after Clank hack. And I got a text from Jack or Proxy, I can't remember. And they were like, hey, we're launching pre-sale in like 30 minutes. You should launch. And I was like, I told my co-founders, I was like, we're going to be launching something soon. Like we've been thinking about doing something like this for years in some shape or form. But they were both traveling and I was like, well, I'm just going to send this thing. So I launched it and I found out that there was like, 2 hours for pre-sale. So I was like, okay, I have some time to like scrape together some wallets, like get some funds together, maybe get the boys to send some over too, to like capture some more of the pre-sale. Cause that's the whole reason for doing it. And the pre-sale sold out in like 6 minutes. I managed to only get like 3% myself, which was hilarious. But that aside, I think that launching a coin is something that we've always wanted to do. And we've always seen it as like when we were going to do it, like people check their wallets, like almost, and like, their trades more often than their emails or like social media, because like there's money involved. So like, what if you potentially had a business card in a ton of people's pockets just by like them having some of the coins? So that was like, we wanted to think of it in terms of like, we don't want to use this to make money, at least for the first year, because it's an experiment. Like we would figure out what we want to do with the fees from a Clanker. But yeah, mainly just using it as like a marketing experiment to see if we could, build on top of it a benefit system that is, still legal, obviously, because there's a lot of lines that need to be written there. But do it in a meaningful way and doing it in a way that's, saying that this is not set in stone. This is an experiment. We're going to adapt. We're going to take community feedback. So that's what we've been working on since we launched the coin. And we should be launching at the end of the month, finally, with like a frame for benefits. So this would be like just general members, which is like a fraction of a cent to get in and like get some like just general benefits. And then for the like the premium tier holders, you would be like basically signing an agreement with us to skip to the front of the line in terms of clients and get a discovery, which is like discovering the project, which we normally, would charge a decent sum of money. But seeing that it's all linked to token price and it's 1% of supply in order to do it, it's just going to be interesting how that plays out and how we'll have to adjust it over time. So as far as right now, we have Derek Brown's native, Jihad's native, a project called The Creators, which is going to be a big database of creators on Base. And it might be on a redacted wallet at some point in the future. Jason Chang, who's also a big person on Warpcast, Basil, and then Clanker itself. So we had a target of like 5 people. I think we've got 6. We're probably going to open it up to more soon. So yeah, the initial idea was that we would take 25% of our time and dedicate it to token-based projects or coin-based projects. And I think we're going to have to up that pretty soon already to like probably 30 or 40%. So, and then, yeah, I mean, as far as Clanker goes, we've been working on branding, given that we did, branding for Proxy Studio, and we're just doing it in a way of, knowing what I know about Alex and Jack after meeting them a number of times. We didn't really go through a traditional discovery. I just sort of like went with what felt right for the brand. And we just been riffing with Anon Poppy on some merch, a lot of like found old illustration art, using some old English, using some like sort of, more futuristic, like bent pixels type stuff, David Rudnick type stuff. But like, yeah, just sort of trying to figure out the brand and hopefully get to a place where, the brand can always be changing, because it does have Clanker, has to encompass projects with everything from Bumshaft and Dickbutt to stuff like Native and Banker. So like the brand image itself has to be able to adapt. So, there needs to be a lot of variant logos and a very big breadth to the system of, variant logos that are available for different applications and merch and, within the app and within Clank.world and, so many different shapes and forms for the index. So I think it's, there is going to be a set of core logos which will come out, and I'm going to release all of the logos that have been developed, sketches, everything to the public to remix and play with. But yeah, I think it's been really fun, and we should have, I think, finally an official brand for Clanker in the next couple of weeks. I'd say definitely by the end of March.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the way that you describe, like I hadn't thought of it as much of, what you were saying about how like Clanker, has to sort of make sense as the launcher platform, whatever you want to call it, that underlies, both Banker and Dickbutt. And like that's, whatever, like Gadoopy and Native or whatever it is. And so it's like this insane range, like basically complete polar opposite sort of types of projects. And yet, like what I've seen so far on like t-shirts and logos that have sort of come out, like the Clanker brand, it feels like it's sort of like it is taking a position, like it is sort of communicating an aesthetic or whatever you want to call it. Like I probably don't have the right, design terminology to say what I'm trying to say, but basically like you look at something else that is sort of like, take Base, for example, like people can build all sorts of stuff on Base all across the spectrum, similarly to Clanker. And so accordingly, Base sort of has this, pretty neutral, I would say, logo. It's not like a slight or a dig. Yeah. It's not to say it's bad. It's just like, it doesn't feel very opinionated or, like it has much of like sort of personality. And I think for Base that works. It's just like, we're here, we're the base for everything. It's a great name. They've got the simple color. I'm partial to blue and I like circles. So it sort of works for me. Yeah. But Clanker doesn't feel like it took that route. And I think that's interesting given the context of the situation. But I personally, I feel like, a founder, a company to a large degree sort of is, resembles the founder. And I feel like, I've only had a brief conversation with Proxy and exchanged some messages and a conversation with Dish as well, both just for Purple People, but, and both great guys, but like, I feel like they have enough, like the brand sort of reflecting them requires to have that personality, like the neutral sort of thing wouldn't vibe as well. So it's, yeah. I think it's nice that you guys have gone in that direction. The other thing, just a clarifying point on what you were mentioning with like both natives and the few sort of like token based projects you were mentioning, are those clients like you were talking about like 30% of the time and whatnot, of like your work, allocating towards those. What was the thing that was separating those? Is it just the fact that they're tokens, or are they actually clients as a result of owning? I sort of missed a bit on like the percentage holdings of Opsys. Are they sort of clients as a virtue of holding a certain amount of Opsys, or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, you got it. So basically, we've changed the model once already. We were having people. So in order to be like a premier partner, you have to have 1% of supply. And once you have 1% of supply, half of that gets locked for a year. And that year lock is also in step with a master service agreement. We want to be able to do this all on chain. Right now, we're working out the system to be able to do that. But essentially, like, most design firms, most, vendors operate on like, you sign an overall master service agreement, then you scope out projects from there. So it's basically just like the setup in the onboarding process to like get them in and get them, skin in the game wise into it. And then, so half of that 1% is locked, and then the other half is paid to us in Opsys. And that's to get, a discovery sized to your project, which, within range is about 6 to 8 weeks. So yeah, it's still very experimental, but I think over time, we're going to build in some mechanisms where people that lock for multiple years, we're working out the legalities on rewards. We have to be very careful with that one. But we're hoping to be able to stream rewards back to our clients in a meaningful way, and probably some of the top holders as well, if not, a larger swath of those. We just have to work through some details on it. So like, yeah, the whole idea is that like we're only buying back or like spending on deck screener updates for the first year out of like the fees that we're making back. And we're accruing a larger percentage of the token in order to figure out ways to stream it back to people. And I think streaming is an important thing that like, me and my partners really just found out, about a couple months ago. But like, you picture token price fluctuating, especially on a coin like ours, quite a bit in its early stages. And like, if you can stream rewards per block back to top holders, then like their portion is going up over time. And like, we all know that like the most convicted and people and projects are the ones that you want holding more of your token. And not only does it help in that sense, but it also helps in the sense that, if the value fluctuates downward pressure, and maybe, they've gotten a little bit more overnight, then you're kind of evening out the balance in the account over time. Hopefully the days when it spikes, it's even better. And the days when it's lower, at least it's not as low as it could have been if you're streaming rewards. So yeah, just some thoughts around that. But we still have to work out quite a few things there. I think rewards probably won't go live until like the summer at some point. But yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I like the way you're approaching the token in general, and yeah, I mean, I like the sound of all of it and understand all of that takes some time, and there's legal complexities and whatnot. I know, we've got a hard stop here in just a couple minutes, and I don't want to push up too hard against it. I've accepted the fact that we're just going to have to cut this conversation, earlier than I'd like, but it was completely my fault getting on late and getting oriented and everything like that. But maybe just, a 1 minute or, 2 minute response to my last question, which again is like not a last question to end on, but we'll just sort of end in the middle here. But when you say like discovery, I have no idea what that means, like 6 to 8 weeks of discovery. Like what does that process look like from I know we only got a minute, like I said, but from a high level, like what goes into discovery, and then we'll just cut it on a complete, middle piece of the conversation after that.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, and I can run over a couple minutes here. Yeah, so I mean, discovery is typically what we want from every person that's coming in the door to get engaged in. I mean, it allows us to level set with them on a deeper level and really understand, each corner of what the problem is that they're trying to solve. So for instance, if we take someone that is coming in that needs branding work, we need to ask them a series of questions about, what that means. What's the scope like in terms of deliverables? What's the scope in terms of timeline? So asking them, short, medium, long-term goals. Short meaning like couple of months, medium meaning 6 months, long-term meaning, a year plus, at least in this space. And then, asking a lot of personal questions. Like with Derek from Native, we asked him, what video games he spent playing the longest in his whole life. What are his favorite writing instruments and peripherals to use on the computer? A lot of questions about aesthetics. So like, what are your favorite brands and why? Because it's very difficult, I think, for some people it's like, you can say you like Nike, but why do you like it? Is it the value? Is it the logo? Is it like a pair of shoes that you liked one time? Is it the quality? Is it, a friend that wore that? Now you like it for some reason. Like what exactly is it about it? And we like to do that with websites, startups or companies' social media profiles. Like, oh, I like this person's social media presence. Like what is it about that presence that you like? And not that we do social media, but understanding the way that they think helps us better understand what they're trying to solve and helps us get to a solution quicker. So those are the first couple discovery sessions, which are just like a lot of questions. Then there's vision boarding, which is basically like taking their vision. We ask them to make like a small mood board as best they can handle it. And then we come in with our own version of ours, and then we start to meld them together and ask for, basically like desired areas and less desired areas. And then we start to funnel in the vision a bit more and focus the laser a bit more. And then we start switching into from there, in a branding project, specifically sketches for logos. So these aren't like finalized or anything like that, because we go through typically like, 3 or 4 rounds of feedback on these, but, going through a bunch of iterations, and then focusing in on those, like what you're seeing with the Clanker gifts that, we released early on. And just really trying to funnel into like, what are the fonts? What are the colors? What are the applications that we're using it in? Is it in 3D? Does it have some sort of like other treatment, like a stamp effect, or does it have a grittiness to it? Is it just the font? Are we doing gradients? Is there, like there's so many questions in there, that get solved over that process. And usually a lot of the front loading and the questions helps us get a lot of that out of the way, so that, I mean, you want to know a lot to start. Otherwise you might end up solving the wrong problem. And then it's a big back and forth. So yeah, I mean, discovery process, people have been leaning towards more, I'd say over like the last 5-6 years, really sets you up for success on both ends. And like, what I like to say to people is like, well, I don't want to do that. I just, I want a logo, like just show me what you got or whatever. And it's like, I guess the correlation I make is, you go to the store, you buy a pair of sneakers or a pair of pants. You bring it home, for whatever reason, it doesn't feel the same way it did in the store, doesn't look right, didn't match what you wanted. And you can bring it back and return it. But with, design work and dev work, really, you can't go and return it. It's now you're out money and time. When you could have just, front loaded it a little bit and then gotten to desired results. So yeah, I mean, I guess we can hopefully pick this up in a future episode, but this was awesome, man. It was awesome to chat and meet you. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing with, base colors and this new QR coin. I can't wait to see where it goes. So this has been great, dude.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And likewise, have been admiring your work from afar, but whole different level hearing you talk about it. And just that last, I'm actually glad, like, I didn't think it would make for much of an ending. And certainly it does leave a cliffhanger to pick up upon I'd love to hear like sort of the rest of the process, what happens after discovery. But that actually was like somehow felt like an ending to at least this chapter of the conversation. It's super interesting. And, I don't know, it sounds like just really interesting and fun work, for creative people and a person like yourself. So, cool for me to learn about it. Like I said, I had no idea. And yeah, it makes a ton of sense, basically spending those several weeks sharpening the axe, so to speak, so that when you come and actually start swinging, some good chance at getting a good result. So yeah, appreciate the time, going a little bit over, and, My bad. I'm a little bit of a late start, but
All
looking
good,
forward
brother.
to part two at some point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I see you at Farcon. You gonna be there?
I will. At least I'm planning to. So that's only a couple months away. I'll look forward to it.
All right, brother. Thank you
All right,
for the
man.
time.
Likewise. Have a good
Happy
weekend.
Friday.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.